Are you a master of arms and armor, lethal with every weapon? Could you kill a dragon with just a flagon, or a sphinx with a gun? Do you want to play a class that fits any conceivable martial archetype? If you said yes to any of the above, then you might enjoy playing a fighter. Hello, my name is Josh, and I make videos about Dungeons & Dragons for both players and DMs. And you're currently watching the fourth video in a series where I take a look at a D&D class and try to make a case for why you would want to play it. It's a new year, it's a new me, and I gotta say, I'm looking forward to it. I got plenty of cool ideas in the works, so be sure to subscribe and make sure you don't miss out. Thank you so much. Thus far, in this series, I've covered the Barbarian, Bard, and Cleric. Now it's onto the Fighter. We're skipping Druid just for now. We don't have the monster manual yet, and obviously the Druid will be impacted by that, so I'll circle back to it eventually. Fighters are a cornerstone of D&D. From the beginning, they've been hacking and slashing their way through every encounter DMs can throw at them, whether combat was intended or not. Whenever I introduce a new player to D&D, I suggest Fighter as a starting point, a good place to learn the basics. But don't worry, there's still plenty of strategizing and options for you RPG veterans. As a fighter, you get access to all of the armor, all of the weapons, and pretty much every martial feature in the game, with very few limitations. You could start with heavy armor and a greatsword, medium armor with a spear and shield, or light armor and a longbow, or any combination you want really. Basically, you get all the toys, and you're the best at using them. A popular character creation method is emulating your favorite hero from media and using them as a foundation for your character. Fighters are really well suited for this. They're mechanically malleable and able to conform to almost any character archetype or playstyle. Speaking of style, at level 1, fighters get access to fighting style feats and weapon mastery. Both features enhance your combat potential. I actually have videos covering both, links in the description. But for now, just know that each of the 10 fighting style feats grants a passive or reactive benefit in combat. I recommend Defense, it's a nice passive buff, and I guess the designers agree with that because they recommended it too. Weapon Masteries, on the other hand, are very much active abilities tied to your weapons. You're a master at using weapons as a fighter, and this is just the mechanical expression of that fact. Every attack is an opportunity to use a weapon mastery effect. The push mastery on the heavy crossbow, for example, means pushing your enemy back with each shot. Topple mastery with a battle axe means you can try and knock the enemy prone. And the graze mastery on the greatsword deals damage even if you miss. It's up to you to pick 3 weapons to master. Eventually you'll get 6 weapon choices, and you'll have these 3 specific masteries on every weapon starting at level 9. So your heavy crossbow could push, sap, or slow, for example. I should also mention that Fighter has no limits on weapon mastery choice, unlike these losers. Next up is Second Wind. This feature lets you heal up a couple of times as a bonus action. You get 1 use back on a short rest, and eventually you'll get up to 4. At level 5, you can move and disengage when you use Second Wind to heal. This means if you're in a tricky spot, you can reposition, or use that extra movement to reach your foe. At level 2, Tactical Mind lets you burn a use of your Second Wind to add a D10 to an ability check. This is your main out-of-combat utility feature, and it's pretty good. If the check still ends up failing, you don't lose that Second Wind use, so there's very little risk. Second Wind is a great feature. It adds a bit of tactics, utility, and mobility. And because it's a bonus action, you're not sacrificing your attacks to use it. Speaking of attacks, your Action Surge lets you double your attacks on a turn. Really, this feature grants an extra action, but the additional attack action, just so tempting. But what I should say is you can save your Action Surge for a clutch dash, disengage, or any other action, really, as long as it's not the magic action. Eventually, you get to do this twice per rest, and it's quite frankly one of the best abilities in the game if you ask me. As a fighter, attacks really are your thing. You get more attacks than any other class with your attack action, eventually 4 every turn, 8 with Action Surge. That's nuts. You make so many attacks, in fact, that at some point, you're guaranteed to miss. Enter Studied Attacks. At level 13, if you miss, the next attack you make on that turn has advantage, as you kind of work out the weaknesses in your foe's defense. Very cool, very flavorful. You are always on the offense as a fighter, but it's not just your armor that protects you. At level 9, you get the Indomitable feature. With this feature, if you happen to fail a save, you can re-roll it and add your fighter level to the roll's total. Eventually, that's a plus 20 to a failed save. So unless you're fighting a god or something worse, you should be fine. You'll get 3 uses eventually, so you'll be hard to keep down. So that's the core fighter. Very solid, straightforward and powerful martial combatant. I'm now going to go over each of the subclasses, and each definitely adds a different flavor. I'll tackle these in order of complexity, starting with the easiest to pick up and play, all the way to the more advanced options. This way, if you're new to the game, you can get a feel for how complex you want the mechanics to be. Our first subclass is the Champion. As a champion, you make it look easy. You're inspiring. Your attacks hit hard and your enemies can't seem to find a way to beat you. You score critical hits more often and each crit grants you extra movement. You have advantage on athletics checks and initiative, and an extra fighting style feat. At higher levels, you start each turn with heroic inspiration, and if you're bloodied, you recover some health. Lastly, you have advantage on death saves, treating any roll of an 18 or above as a 20. And since death saves happen at the start of your turn, you immediately regain some health from your Defy Death feature. This means you're extremely likely to pop back up and make a heroic last stand. Champion adds a nice power boost to the baseline fighter without overwhelming you with features. Everything you get is derived from existing mechanics that you likely have already interacted with. It's a super approachable subclass, and it gets my recommendation as the best option for new players. Moving down the line, we get Cerebral with the Psi Warrior, the Jedi of D&D. Well, kinda. You get a pool of psionic energy dice that grows in power and uses as you level up. Psionics are basically psychic magic, like if a psychic type from Pokemon could cast spells. You can expend these dice to do things like reducing damage to you, adding damage to your attacks, or using the Force. At higher levels, you can fly, psychically shove creatures, create protective force fields, and you gain resistance to both psychic damage and the charm and frighten effects. So you can see why I call them the Jedi of D&D. It's super iconic, and the abilities are doled out gradually, giving you plenty of time to master them. Speaking of master, the Battlemaster is next. If you like a lot of options and big-brained tactical plays, this is the subclass for you. When you first come into this subclass, you choose 3 maneuvers from a list of 20 options. I would describe maneuvers as weapon mastery on steroids. They do things like increase your chance to hit, frighten, or disarm. Many of them also add to the damage of your attack. Each maneuver is fueled by your superiority die, a pool of d8s you get every short rest that will scale up with your fighter level. Eventually, you'll have access to 9 maneuvers at once, and at level 15, you can use 1 maneuver for free every turn. Another feature the Battlemaster gets is their Student of War feature, which gives you proficiency in an artisan's tool and a skill of your choice from the fighter's skill list. Fighters already get 2 of the following skills, but another one helps you feel like a warrior who sharpens their mind as well as their blade. The last feature I'll talk about is Know Your Enemy. This is essentially the Tattle ability from Paper Mario. You look a foe up and down, and just like that, you learn their weaknesses. It's always fun to look at the DM's villain and size them up. The Battlemaster is fun in general, 20 different options to choose from. It's very enticing. And let me remind you that every maneuver will stack with your weapon masteries, so a single attack could push, frighten, and damage an enemy. When each of your attacks is delivering a different effect to the enemy and you're keeping the DM on their toes, you'll know you chose the right subclass. It's probably the best subclass for options outside of like a spellcaster. That brings us to Eldritch Knight. You get cool features like learning a ritual that turns your weapon into Thor's hammer, a free teleport when you action surge, and your attacks giving your target disadvantage against the next spell that you cast. Wait, spells? On a fighter? You've got that right. Eldritch Knight is fighter with a dash of wizard. You got your cantrips, your wizard spells, the whole shebang. You are the fighter's answer to the Bard College of Valor, if that makes sense. Now, you only get 3 cantrips, your spells only go up to level 4, and you only learn 13 of them. But the exciting thing is that you can trade attacks for cantrips and spells during your turn in combat. So you can do things like swinging your sword 3 times and then hitting them with a shocking grasp. Or you can cast Hold Person and then swoop in for 2 melee attacks that will automatically crit. There's a ton you can do even with your limited sampling of the wizard's spell list. Now at the end of these videos, I usually save the best for last. A huge bombshell feature that is really fantastic, a cherry on top. Fighters getting a 4th attack is nice, but it's not a +4 to a couple stats, and it's not Wish. No, the true best features of Fighter comes at level 6 and 14. Let me explain. The Fighter gets 2 more feats than any other class. Get out here, Rogue, I see you. This doesn't sound like much, but what it means is that they will have higher stats and more feats than anyone else. We're talking feats like Great Weapon Master, Crusher, anything that buffs attacks, really. Fighters get more of them, they get them sooner, and these feats stack with their weapon mastery and subclass features. With a single attack, right, you can topple, frighten, push, and do a ton of damage. And that's just your first attack. You're likely sending 7 more your enemy's way this turn. This is why fighters are the best at, well, fighting. It's in the name. This is why they're easy to use but a challenge to master. This is why they dominate the battlefield. This is why I think you'd have a great time playing one in your next D&D adventure. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something or entertained, or ideally both. Have I convinced you to play a fighter? I hope so. It's how I got my start and how I've introduced a lot of players to the game. I might take a break from these class guides for a bit and focus more on DM related content. We'll see. Anyways, chew on that for a second, and on the left here is a video recommended by YouTube, and on the right is a playlist with other videos. Enjoy.